Hey everybody, it's week 10, class is almost over, and something recent happened out in the news, in the world. It happened in academia, and it directly relates to some of the discussions that we've had in class. And I don't often bring in current event stuff, but this one stuck with me because I think it's a really good example of what happens when different values play out in society. So let's start with our values. Many of you and students, right, that have taken this class in the past have expressed love and compassion and loyalty and hard work and diversity, inclusivity, a whole bunch of stuff, right? Success, ambition. I think maybe my most important value, I think, is truth. I think it's the very top. We all have a hierarchy of values, right? Some of them are subordinate to others. I think that this is important. I think love is important. I think compassion is important, but not at the expense of what is real, what is true. For example, why? Why is truth the most important thing to me? I think it works out like this. If truth is your highest value, if you operate first and foremost by what is real and true and not what you want to be true or not what you would like to see, I don't pay deference to feelings as much, though I do take people's feelings into account because I don't want to hurt people. I don't particularly like conflict. But truth will lead us to better outcomes over multiple iterations than other values. If you're compassionate all the time, you will ignore what's good for someone because you don't want them to feel bad. You don't want to see them suffer. Well, what are all the different ways they could suffer? You could suffer financially. You could suffer emotionally. There's all these different ways you could suffer. Truth is hard. It is challenging. It is frustrating, even hurtful sometimes. But it is the optimal way to operate in the world such that the majority of your endeavors will have a better likelihood of succeeding and benefiting you and those around you because you're operating on what is real instead of what is not real. Hopefully that's kind of straightforward. And so I think other values should be subordinated to truth. There is extensive psychological research that shows how other people have different values that they subordinate to truth. I don't want to say that they're wrong to do so because it's their values. It's how they feel about the world. I would just say it's important that we have some pushback. Truth needs to be a high-ranking value in the list of societal values. There is room for others. What am I on about now? Okay, well, in week 8, we talked about Sawhill and Matthews, and they talked about equality and fairness. These things get all muddled. For example, I want fairness. I think it's incredibly important. It's up there with truth, but it's not the same as equality. People are not equal. Almost nothing is the same as something else. And context, inputs matter in a system, which leads to my appreciation for meritocracy. Is it perfect? No. Did Matthews point out the ways in which it is insufficient for a perfect society? Yeah, it's absolutely imperfect. He is right about that 100%. There just isn't a much better option because through meritocracy, we at least get the better ideas and the better, more capable people that can build what we have. I'll leave it out. Yeah, that's sufficient, I guess. Jason Arday, who is he? He's a former Cambridge professor. He was the, I think, youngest Black professor in Cambridge's 800-year history. He was touted and celebrated quite widely. He was mute at the age until the age of 11. He was illiterate until the age of 18. And then he got his PhD at the age of 30 in educational sociology, I believe. He has a list of really amazing accomplishments. He ran 600 miles in 6 days. That is at the very, very pinnacle of human physical capability. He's raised millions and millions of dollars for charities. He's got fellowships with universities across Europe, the United States. And he recently committed suicide. That's our best guess. There's no foul play in his death thus far. And so the assumption is that he committed suicide. Why would he do this? He has a wife and 2 young children. Well, those things I just told you about him are all almost certainly false, almost in their entirety. See, Jason Arday was celebrated for being something that he actually wasn't, right? The meritocracy concept completely failed because truth was a subordinate value to concepts like diversity and equity and inclusivity. Unfortunately, I think this is going to end up being a right versus left disagreement, and that's really unfortunate because, well, we'll keep going here. So what happened was it became evident that though he was touted as this great, amazing researcher, groundbreaking, people started to look into his work and they thought, well, actually, it's almost entirely qualitative, meaning just stories, and not quantitative, meaning data. So there's no concrete research. Autoethnography is him telling a story about his own experiences. These are elements of knowledge, but certainly not the highest quality types of knowledge. They can buttress data, but you need data, you need research to produce useful information. Telling a personal story only gets us so far. It was discovered that he had hundreds of elements of plagiarism in his doctoral dissertation, which he kind of hand waved away. Thousands of people came to his defense. Tens of thousands. I think 14,000 different academics signed petitions in support of Jason. They attacked the media for smearing him, for picking on him. Racism and bigotry and xenophobia and the like were the accusations thrown out. But as investigations continued and the onion layers were peeled back, it became increasingly evident that in fact the concerns were true, and that he is almost entirely his entire story and everything that he's claimed to have done is entirely fraudulent, fabricated, in some cases completely, not just embellished. And so once this became evident, he left his position at Cambridge. It's not clear whether he quit or whether he was let go. And then days later, just a few days ago, he took his own life, it appears. Why am I telling you this tragic, awful story? I come back to the values discussion and which values you place at the top, which values are subordinate. I think truth is really, really, really important, if not the most important. In a situation like this, that wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened because truth is important. And so they would have done their due diligence and they would have looked into him and they would have been somewhat skeptical of his rather crazy claims. But truth wasn't the determining value set here. They were operating on a different set of values, namely diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Now, before I go on a tirade, I want to meet in the middle here. We live in a diverse society, and so we should be inclusive of the diverse members of our society. But there's a difference between making different rules for different groups, people, and having one set of rules that we expect everybody to meet. And if you recall back to Oldenquist, he made this explicit point. We need to have a set of standards that we hold everyone to. And we can look at King as well. Martin Luther King, in his letter from Birmingham jail, he hinted at this, saying, Nobody within these bounds can be considered an outsider. And sociologically and psychologically speaking, what do we do to determine whether people are insiders or outsiders? And Etzioni made this point as well. We judge them by different metrics, different circumstances. We hold them to different standards. So Jason Arday was not held to the same standards. He was not judged by the same metrics that other academics were. He was put in this position. Now, granted, he walked into it. Maybe you see where I'm going. Truth was not operational. Other things were operational, and it led to a catastrophic failure, both in this academic system. It's a huge blunder, terrible controversy. And also, this man lost his life. He took his own life. But given that his entire fraudulent edifice that he had created was called out, he probably didn't see that he had many options left. I don't know what options would be left, but he'd have his wife and kids still. This is what happens when truth is not your highest value. He was celebrated. No one looked into it. No one scratched the surface. No one raised any questions, or they ignored them intentionally. I'm not sure which is worse. And it allowed him to be put into this position with the limelight and the interviews. And it became pretty clear it was all smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of implications for this, but I think it's worth mentioning. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. If any of you end up watching this, you can respond within the discussion board, or you can, I suppose, respond just in the text feed, right, of the YouTube comment section. There's no winners here. One side doesn't get to say, "Yay, we told you so." This is just all terrible. Yeah.